Hello, everyone, and welcome to IFT's Fireside Chat. Today we'll be talking sweet protein, Ultratia Brazzein, and the future of sugar reduction technologies presented by Sweegen.
So my name is Sally Aaron. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Sweegen. Just a quick background on me. I've been in the industry marketing food ingredients for just about 20 years. And my expertise has really, over the years, been natural high-intensity sweeteners. Sweegen does a lot in taste modulation, but really introducing new-to-the-world ingredients. And so that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. And I'd like to introduce our Head of Innovation globally, Casey McCormick.
Thank you, Sally. Casey McCormick, Head of Global Innovation for Sweegen. So my background is in food science. I've been a food scientist for 25 plus years, from venture capital mom and pops to multinational corporations. The last several years I've transitioned from the CPG world into the ingredient world, partially driven by my need to make an impact to society from a public health perspective. So a lot of the last 10 years of my career has been very focused on improving the nutrient density of foods, improving the taste of foods, and trying to get sugar out of as many food products as possible.
Nice. I actually have one. Okay, so I think for those who are familiar with the fireside chat format, this is a very informal program. So we have a few talking points that we're going to go through. We'll try to get through that as fast as we can. I'm sure everybody's got a ton of questions. So we'll get through the information and then open it up. So Casey, the topic at hand is sweet proteins, Brazzein in particular. Everybody wants to know about that, but we're just going to give you a bit of a sense of who Sweegen is, because like a lot of people may not be familiar with us as a company. So why don't you go ahead and give us an overview on the company? Quick format.
Quick format. Oh boy, when am I ever brief? Sweegen is obviously an ingredient provider, but first and foremost a technology company and a solutions provider. So we've been a company for about 5 to 7 years now. We're known most broadly for having the deepest portfolio of high-value stevia rhabdosides available globally through our proprietary processes there. But that's actually just part of the building blocks of solutions that we have available. So in addition to our sweetener profile, we have a very deep portfolio of flavor modulation that allows us to have a creative building block approach where we're able to take the parts of our portfolio that bring benefit to our clients' products and able to deliver them a solution that translates into a better taste performance for their consumers.
Excellent. Good. Okay, so let's get into the topic at hand. From my point of view, the last big innovation we really had in the sweetener space was really, was the introduction of stevia, right? It's been a number of years since I came to the industry. Always been this long wish list of different high-intensity sweeteners that people have been dying to bring to the market, and Brazzein was always on that list. And so it's super exciting now that this is really, potentially it's going to happen. We've announced it. So why don't we get into the basics of Brazzein? So just high level. What should we know about it?
Well, I mean, the headline is that I anticipated to disrupt the natural sweetener industry. A couple different things. The big things, like if you walk away from today, just remember these 2 or 3 things. The first is that Brazzein is going to, in the long run, allow a level of sweet intensity that right now the more traditional natural non-nutritive sweeteners have not been able to achieve. And it's going to be able to do it at a price point that's going to be competitive with the more commodity-based sweetening, whether that's the natural sweeteners such as sucrose, or even looking at potentially the ability to target the artificial cost. So Brazzein is going to be very disruptive specifically for those reasons. Now, just what is Brazzein? For those of you who've never heard about it, I was actually talking to someone recently, and they were, I think we're going to talk a little bit about maybe consumers later, but they were asking, what's the awareness of consumers? And I was like, most food scientists haven't heard of this stuff. So Brazzein, for those of you like me who once upon a time didn't know what it was, it is a naturally occurring peptide. So 54 amino acid sequence. It is indigenous to the ubili fruit. For those of you who don't know what the ubili fruit is, it grows in Western Africa, and it's something that has always been identified as a very high-value sweetener for a couple of different reasons that I'll get into later. I think the lens to put on this, though, is that peptides are something that are known and demonstrated to have sweetening efficacy. We're all aware of aspartame here. Aspartame, when it came out, was considered very important in the industry. Obviously, the takeaways that kind of aspartame is maybe less appealing today is, first off, the artificiality piece. So, consumers are looking for natural sweeteners, with aspartame being in the synthetic world. Also, that it does degrade over time. So, if you look at maybe cola beverages where you would have a full sugar in a diet, the diet will traditionally have less shelf life because the aspartame degrades in acid over time. So. So it's something that's going to solve, I think, what is a lot of pain points. So things that are holding some products or brands back from moving into the natural sweetener space, it's going to be able to help bridge that gap.
So Casey, do you want to talk a little bit about the amino acid descriptors that we've talked about, just how and why that's important?
I was going to ask that. No. I wanted to talk about my favorite topic. Regulatory.
No, you want to talk about sweet receptors.
Should we take a poll? All right, hands up for sweet receptors. Okay. Regulatory. It looks like a tie. I'm going to go with Sally. You can make the deciding vote. Sweet receptors?
Yeah.
Okay. So, sweetness. Don't tell my boss I'm saying this. Sweetness is super simple. Okay? Things like bitterness and astringency and sour, those are very complex if you think about the receptors on your tongue. But sweet is simple. You really only have two receptors on your tongue. You have the T1R2 and the T1R3. Those two receptors are typically, most sweeteners, be they natural, artificial, nutritive, non-nutritive, are going to attack both receptors. There are no natural sweeteners, non-nutritive sweeteners, that specifically target the T1R3 sweet receptor. And the reason that's both important and interesting is that is the sweet receptor that's associated with umami. So as we all, many people think about that old traditional picture of the tongue, with the 4 different zones that now we recognize is really not the way the world is, but with umami sort of being a real bridge between them. So if you think about what umami means, it's not just there's a sweet part of it, but there's also this full flavoredness. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about sweetness efficacy. So if you think about something, the ability to stimulate sweet receptors in a way that hasn't been done before by targeting, but also in a manner that they're going to improve and elevate the level of flavor delivery as a result.
Wow, you went deep on that.
You told me to.
I know. Okay. All right. Let's get into favorite topic now, regulatory. Let's get that out of the way. We just figured everybody wants to know about it, so we're going to hit it head on, and then we're going to use that to kind of build out the rest of the comments. So go ahead.
Sure. And I would say, the regulatory framework kind of impacts the way Brazzein is going to be brought into the world by SweetGen. So obviously, both domestically and abroad, there's various different regulatory authorities, all of which have different approval requirements and protocols that are associated. So in the United States, we are actually in the process of applying for FEMA GRAS. So that is the ability to use Brazzein as a natural flavor, so specifically as a flavor modifier. So Brazzein, I think I've introduced it so far mostly as a sweetener, but it actually has flavor modification properties. For example, I can tell you that using it in a beverage will reduce the perception of acidity that consumers have. So we are in the process with FEMA. We anticipate approval from FEMA in the coming weeks, and that's going to inform sort of our go-to-market plan for Brazzein as a natural flavor. So appearing on ingredient legends as a natural flavor, later on this year. The other timelines, the other regulatory bodies. So the FDA process for approval as an additive is a slightly longer process. So we're in the process of putting together some of the additional dossiers that are required, and we anticipate to be in a position to have self-GRAS towards the end of 2023 in anticipation of FDA acceptance some months after that. And that process with the FDA will also inform our pathways for the other global bodies, so the EFSAs of the world, the Codexes, et cetera, and the various other markets outside of the United States.
So the other question that comes up, and just because I'm sure it's on everyone's mind because this is a protein, the question of allergenicity, and the initial indications are that that's not going to be a problem for this as well. So I'm sure that was a question. All right, so we all know that just because something tastes sweet, it doesn't mean that it necessarily tastes good. And so, can you give us a sense of, what are the good things? What has your experience been in working with Brazzein, Casey?
Well, I think actually maybe the way I'd like to answer it is, I mean, all these things, hey, listen, okay, it hits a different receptor, it's from a protein, not from a bunch of bound glucose molecules. The point is, though, why should anybody care besides something being just novel and different? The point is it has to make an impact with consumers, and it has to be very functional in food. So I mentioned it earlier in reference to some of the artificials, but one of the reasons Brazzein, which has been identified from nature 30, 40 years ago, but has never, but was always very desirable, is it has tremendous functionality. Okay, so it's highly soluble in water. It is stable at pH down to 2.0, and it is heat resistant. So we've studied up to 100 degrees Celsius for 2 hours without any denaturing of the peptide itself. So it's extremely functional in those regards. The other thing is we think about the quality of sweetness. So I was mentioning this earlier with regards to taste receptors. The quality of the sweetness that Brazzein can replace, because it's targeting specific receptors, is extremely powerful. So it's not just a matter of replacing sweetness, but if you think of some of the legacy technologies out there, there's a lot of flavor technology involving Reb A, for example. The quality of the sweetness that it's replacing in terms of sweetness, character in the mouth, is extremely high and outperforms, I would say, the legacy products. The other thing that's very interesting, especially as we look towards 2024 and using the material as a sweetener, so Brazzein as a sweetener on its own will probably not be the most appealing sweetener, specifically because the sweetness character is not exactly the same as sugar, like most non-nutritive sweeteners. It has a very late onset of sweetness, so from maybe 2-3 seconds after you put it onto your tongue before you actually get the highest level of sweetness, the iso-sweet. And then it takes a few seconds actually for that sweetness to clear your palate. And if you use it at high enough levels, at a few hundred parts per million, you're actually going to generate some aftertaste and some linger, which we know are non-desirable. What we found, though, is that actually Brazzein paired with some of our other, imagine this, guys, if I take Brazzein and I pair it with some of the other tools I have in my toolbox, it's actually better. What we're actually in the process of doing now is mapping out some sweetener systems where we can actually, our ambition is to map sweetener systems, utilizing, I mentioned our flavor modifications, our stevia, and Brazzein, to actually have toolbox kits that we can replace sucralose, sugar, in terms of temporal profile of sweetness, in terms of sweetness intensity. I think I mentioned earlier, right now a lot of the naturals can't get to that level of sucralose, the ability to perform at sweetness efficacy levels as high as sucralose, and that's just driven by the fact that pairing Brazzein with our stevia rhabdiosides is a 1 + 1 = 2.5.
Awesome. All right. So what can people expect when Brazzein hits the market? Sweegen has a B2B brand name, Ultratia Brazzein, but what can folks expect in the coming months from Sweegen?
About Brazzein?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to sell it to them.
That's a lie.
We're not, well, it's me being silly. The way we're going to bring Brazzein to market, I mentioned earlier, we have a regulatory framework which is informing our go-to-market plan. So, I mentioned earlier we anticipate FEMA GRAS approval in the coming weeks. What that means is that we will have natural flavor samples of Brazzein available in Q3 of this year. And when I say flavor samples available, I mean you can contact all my colleagues in sales and set up demonstrations for us to show you Brazzein application in beverages, all this great billboard material I'm giving in terms of sweetness quality, a chance for us to demonstrate that for you too. But obviously after you try the demo, you want to place a purchase order right away. We'll have commercial inventories available in Q3. So looking beyond that, we will again, with the eye on FDA and EFSA approvals, we will have specific sweetener systems. So combinations of Brazzein and flavor materials as well as stevia that will be actually more sweetener systems. So if we think about total zero alcohol, I wish, zero added sugar type beverages, systems that are designed to be just dropped into whatever particular formulation challenge you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we want to make clear is that we know this is a new to the world ingredient. It's going to be new to formulators. It's going to be new to consumers, and so we realize there's a lot of work that needs to start happening so people can learn how to formulate with this. Okay, so I think that's kind of the main points that we wanted to cover, and so I think we can go ahead and open it up for questions. And you're gonna, yeah. Yep. So I think go ahead and just raise your hand, and we'll bring the microphone over to you.
So how does it pitch against Tomatin, which is also protein-based, in terms of sweetness and other profile?
Did my boss pay you to ask that?
We planted it. No,
no, okay. Actually, just side note, subsequent to Brazzein, Sweetgen, we will be introducing Tomatin to the marketplace as well. Tomatin today, I would describe there's a few things. Tomatin has a higher level of sweetness intensity, 3,000 times versus 2,000 times from Brazzein. Tomatin not quite as pH or heat resistant. I think that they are probably in similar families. If we think about sweet character being late onset, I would describe Tomatin as having significantly more linger and significantly delayed onset relative to Brazzein. So they're probably, again, they're both sweet peptides, so they're kind of in that same family. But the character for Brazzein is, I'd say, more mainstream relative to Tomatin, that is a little more specialty.
Another?
You mentioned heat stability up to 100 C. Have you looked into UHT, high heat?
Absolutely. That's nothing. That's just 4 seconds. 290s. Yeah, no issue with UHT. Yeah. Yes.
Have you looked at the functional attributes of Brazzein? What happens after people swallow it? So what happens in the gut health, absorption, metabolism, those kind of things?
It is a part of our FDA protocol to actually put together those studies.
This sounds exciting. In the regulatory path, you talked about submitting for an additive, but then self-affirmation of GRAS. Are you going down the GRAS route, or do you
Correct.
think it'll be an additive? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, self-GRAS, no objection letter following that.
Can you share with us a little of how it's produced?
You want to take that one?
We are using fermentation to produce Brazzein. It's, when we make stevia today, we actually have a wonderful story around that, in that there is a lot of people out there making Reb A, and as a result of that process, they have crude extract that remains. We have a process, enzymatic bioconversion, that converts that waste stream into these high-value rhabdiosides. Unfortunately, with Brazzein, there's not an agricultural byproduct that we can start with. Our preference would be to use bioconversion, but because there is no actual agricultural product that we have access to, we're using fermentation.
Any study has been performed on side effect like allergy? Allergy?
Allergenicity.
Yeah, all protocols so far show no sign of allergy. We do have additional protocols with FDA to follow.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Hi. You talk about sweetness. How is it in terms of browning or moisture, other properties that traditional sugar is used for, at least in baked goods?
That's a great question. I would not anticipate any browning benefits, specifically because we anticipate the usage rates will be so low. with 2,000 times sweetness efficacy, I mean, people are going to be using 20 to 40 parts per million.
Any more questions?
Well, thank you to the audience for your participation, and thank you to our wonderful speakers.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us.